right. Welcome, everyone. We're super excited to have a guest speaker here today. Luis Cortes is joining us. Kelty's going to do a short little bio after me. So first, Luis, we are so grateful for you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us. Like, we are so appreciative. And before we before I hand it off to Kelty, I just want to tell you a little bit about who's here in this group so you have an idea of who is here. We have our counselors that are here. If we can get all our counselors just to maybe raise your hand or put your little button that says hi. Yes, say hello to Luis. Our counselors work directly with students. We have a current student population of about 4,000 students. Most are working adults, so very much, students who are in need of support. So our counselors work with providing academic, personal support, as well as career support to our students. Also in the house today, we have our student engagement team here as well. So we have Donna and Chris from our student engagement. They work directly with students, also in providing, again, lots of campus activities, engaging our students with building a community. So they are key players in that. Additionally, we also have our student support specialist here. We have Acacia from our student support specialist team, as well as from our persistence team, we have Arindira. Both work directly with students, ensuring students can successfully onboard and join our team, as well as ensuring students are making progress throughout their journey and ensuring that they're being connected with the right resources. We also have we have several folks from our instructional side of the house. We have Richard Garcia, who is our coordinator of academic support programs. We also have Ashley Odell, who is our instructor for WF 500, which is getting our students ready for the workforce. We also have the honor and the privilege of having our VP of Student Success joining us today, Don Orth. He's here, and I know he's super excited to be here, but he oversees our entire division. And so all of these programs are mostly under him, except for the instructional side of the house. We also have some of our leadership folks here. We have Robin Dizies, who is a manager of counseling and career services. So she works with me, as well as Kelty and all of our counselors and career services. And we also have Amna Jara here, who oversees our student engagement program. And we also have representatives from our DSPS as well as our Veteran Services program. We have Carlos, who's a student support specialist within that program, as well as Aaron Sullivan Arcos, who's one of our counselors that works especially with our students with disabilities. So I think we've gotten everybody. If I missed it, oh wait, we have a rock star. Oh, I gotta mention one of our major rock stars. Vanna Wong is our student ambassador to Counseling and Career Services. She is absolutely a rock star, and we're so happy to have you here, Vanna.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, awesome. And last but not least, another rock star is Kelty, of course, whom you already know. So there's no introduction that's needed there, but I am going to hand it off to Kelty.
Awesome. Great. I'm oddly nervous to do this intro. I think just because I know Luis and no bio will ever do the justice to the work that he does. So I will give it my best shot, but so excited to have you here. Luis Cortes Ramiro is a prominent attorney known for his significant role in defending the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, also known as DACA, at the U.S. Supreme Court. He served as one of the lead attorneys for the landmark case DHS v. Regents of the University of California. This case was pivotal as it challenged the Trump administration's 2017 decision to end DACA. Luis's involvement in this case was particularly resonant because he himself is a DACA recipient. This personal connection to the issue adds a unique and powerful perspective to his legal advocacy. Luis has also been involved in litigating constitutional law, helping individuals seek asylum and refuge in the United States, and helping victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. He's a partner at Nova Legal Group and is dedicated to fighting for a more humane immigration system. On a personal note, I have known Luis for over 15 years, and over the years, I have seen his incredible commitment to this work only grow. And I'm so grateful you were able to carve time out in your schedule to speak to us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Luis. We did provide him with a list of questions to get us started. So once he's had a chance to address all those questions, we will open up to the group for Q&A.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. And thanks everybody for making time. I know you all are very busy helping our community and then the students. And a big shout out to the county for bringing me on and thinking of me and speaking to you all. So I'm very excited to be here and hopefully you can get a lot out of this presentation. And as I was thinking about kind of how to organize our conversation today, I got some of the list of questions that I was trying to weave into like the first half of this conversation. And so what I'm hoping to do is that I'm hoping to answer some of the questions that I already have throughout the course of a presentation that I hope will last kind of a first half hour together, so up until 3:30, and then leave the last little bit for questions and answers for folks that have that. And I do understand and appreciate that there are a lot of practical concerns regarding like employment and like what are the actual resources, and we will be getting into those kind of towards the tail end of the first half. But I think one of the things to really I think understand, or to at least hope to understand, is kind of what is going on right now. Like why do some people have DACA? How come some people don't have it? Like what does that even mean? And like what is DACA? And so, you know, what is going on? And so hopefully knowing a little bit of the backdrop of it will help you better understand kind of what, not just what the lay of the land is right now, but hopefully better understand the news that is coming, because DACA is still being challenged and there is a very real threat to it still. And so the idea hopefully is that by the end of our conversation, not only are you equipped with better resources or some resources in order to have some practical effect, but also have a deeper understanding of just like what is going on and what is the kind of the landscape of what's happening. So so I did put something together. I will try to kind of not speed through it, but there is a lot of videos that I want to show, the short clips that I think are either amusing or can do slightly better job than I can explaining some tidbits. So you're not going to just see my big old head here the whole time. But we'll try to just jump right into it. So give me 1 second while I have it here. Cool. Okay. So can everybody see that okay?
Looks great.
Okay, very cool. So, so just a little bit about me. So I actually grew up in California. I'm based out of really rainy Seattle now, so that's where I'm located. But I grew up in California, in the Bay Area specifically, for anybody who's in the Bay, or grew up in the Bay or whatever. I grew up in the Bay Area. I went to Sequoia High School, and that's a picture of Sequoia High School of what it kind of looked like then. I don't know what it looks like now. But that's where I went to high school. And my college career started at the community college level. So I went from Sequoia High School to community college, and I ended up going to Kenyatta College in Redwood City. And in part of that was because in high school, I disclosed to a counselor at the time that I didn't have legal status and that I wasn't born here. And this is again pre-DACA. We're talking like 2006, not to like age myself too much, but um and you know, at that time the concept of like dreamers and who undocumented students are and that kind of thing was still pretty new. I think pretty new to colleges, pretty new to administrators, pretty new to you know, student resource helpers. And so when I disclosed this to my high school counselor, they just straight up told me like, oh, you just can't go to college. Like that was their I think that was just basically their answer. And so it wasn't until I met someone at the community college level that they had corrected that information and said, actually, there is access to college. It's not going to be easy, right? Because the financial resources at the time were really scarce, and very limited, but there is a way. And so I started at the community college level, and eventually I went to San Jose State University, where I majored in sociology and Mexican American studies. And that's actually where I met Kelty. I met Kelty at San Jose State University. She was literally the first person that I met when I got to San Jose State. And we ended up both studying sociology. And if for any of you who know Kelty, it may be unsurprising to know that as a student, or as we were students, I would be the one who would be working on a paper for like a month and would get a B on it. And she'd be the person who would work on the paper like for a week and get an A on it. And so I was constantly just slightly jealous of how she was able to pull that off. But I was able to meet Kelty at San Jose University, and I actually like dug deep and found a photo of Kelty and I when we were at San Jose State. And so that's Kelty and I like 15 years ago bowling, and I can tell that we're bowling because of my shoes, I think. So
Side note, Luis, I'm going to interject here for counselors. The person on the left is Gina, who has also presented to you all. So that's how we all met. Just a fun fact.
so we all met at San Jose State. And so that's a little bit of kind of like my background and where I just a little bit more about me other than the bio that happened. But so I think jumping right into it, I think the first thing to really kind of know is just to like recognize who are our undocumented student population and what is what is the population here that we're serving. And I will pause there and show you a clip about kind of what I think the assumptions and misunderstandings are of who is undocumented, or what population is there when we think about the undocumented population. So the next video you're about to watch is from this group called Dreamers Adrift, who make these kind of videos to kind of bring out at least some humor in the different aspects of being undocumented, and to kind of set this up a little bit. I think when we're thinking about undocumented students or students with DACA, I think there is a misunderstanding that it's very constantly like a Latino issue or a Latino population, and that the Latino community is really just the only people impacted by this. And so this video sheds a little light on that. Can you guys hear the sound okay?
Yes.
I can.
Dude, freaking bus is taking forever again.
We're gonna be late again.
It's all your fault.
My fault?
Yeah, your
How?
fault.
You're the one fixing your hair.
Girl, but it looks good.
Anyways.
Looks good. Dude, it looks good. You can't deny it. You can't
No.
just create magic.
No, you can't do this.
Whatever. Dude, ¿de cuándo acá los chinitos usan el bus también?
Desde que son codos.
Me cae tan gordo que la gente teniendo papeles y teniendo licencia puedan ir manejando a la escuela, y uno que no tiene papeles tiene que tomar el bus y pues, nada más están haciendo espacio.
Te apuesto que el carro lo tienen a casa, pero solo por no ponerle gas.
Gente coda.
Mhm.
Güey, ¿qué horas son?
No sé, güey, se me olvidó el reloj.
Hi, excuse me, do you have the time?
Sí, son las 2 de la tarde.
Habla español.
¿Nos entendió, güey?
Sí los entendí. ¿Y sabes qué? También soy un documentado y no tengo licencia, por eso estoy aquí esperando por el bus.
¿Eres indocumentado de China?
No, de Perú.
So it goes into a little bit about what we stereotype, or what I think we all kind of have a sense of who the undocumented folks are and are not. And I think what the statistics really has bared out, now that we have a little bit more reliable statistics about who like the immigrant student population or is undocumented student population is now, is that it is very intersectional in different aspects of it. It's not just a Latino problem. So just something to think about, right, as we're thinking about what is the students that we're talking about here, and that we can't always tell, right, on who we assume this might be impacting. And one of the things and one of the questions that I received was, as I was going through college, and then again, this is pre-DACA, I was going through college from like the 2006 to 2010 years, and DACA was enacted in 2012. And one of the things that I received was, or one of the questions I received was, what is one thing I wished that administrators knew at that time, or what is one thing that I wish that they were aware of at that time as I was navigating this process. And I think, honestly, I think just recognizing that we exist as, I guess, a student population and being sensitive to that fact is something that I think it's going to be really important, because the at that time, if disclosing to somebody that somebody's undocumented it can be a very, very big deal. And not only is it disclosing something about themselves, but oftentimes it can disclose something about their family. And it can disclose something about extended members of the family that that otherwise other people won't know. And I think one of the worries about like telling someone that you don't have legal status is just a fear of retaliation. Like, who are you telling, and are they gonna what are they gonna do with that information, and how are they gonna react to that, right? When we think about immigration and just as a topic in general, it's not only is it such a hot topic issue, it's also can be very divisive. And so and having those conversations with administrators, with college counselors, with any kind of school counselor, can be sufficiently scary enough to be a deterrent. Some people just won't even go because of just like even the prospect of having these conversations. So and there's another clip here that I want to show that I think really bears that out. I guess just to set up the clip, this clip is a few years old. And for those who may not know, there is a law in California called the Assembly Bill 540, AB 540. And what AB 540 did in California was that it allowed for students who were undocumented, who had otherwise graduated from a California high school, to be able to pay in-state tuition in California colleges, whether that's community college or a four-year university. And so it did allow access for in-state tuition. It was one of the first of its kind. California was really a pioneer with that. But the second thing it did, what AB 540 did, is that it started to give individuals a way to identify themselves that was a bit of a code, right? People would be able to say, I'm an AB 540 student, without having to just say the words, I'm undocumented, right? And it was a way to kind of have these conversations a little bit more softly, and hopefully the other person was kind of picking up what you're putting down. But what happens when the administrator that you're talking to has no idea what you're talking about, and has no idea kind of what this kind of language and resources are, and how can that ultimately develop? So let's watch how that ultimately developed here. Mm. Oh.
So I hope that it's been really helpful today, and have an awesome day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next.
Hi, I came to see if I can get an extension on my tuition.
Okay, so the deadline is today, and it really needs to be in today, and you should have been more responsible to get it in.
I know. I need my classes are about to get canceled, so I need to pay. I need an extension.
Okay, so do you have financial aid?
I don't have financial aid. I'm an AB 540 student. AB 540. AB 540. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know what an AB 540 student is?
Those are students who are illegal.
Illegal?
Illegal.
Oh, so you're an illegal student?
No, I'm not an illegal student. It's not how you say it. It's actually undocumented student. AB 540 student.
Okay, so you're not undocumented student.
Yes.
Okay. So do you have a form of identification, such as
Uh,
like a school ID and another form of identification with you?
Yeah. Here's my school ID, and here's my
That-
other ID.
Hi, Julio. See you Friday.
So, we're in the United States, sir, not Mexico.
I know my geography. I know we're in the United States. It's my government. It's Mexican consular card. Has my name, my birth date, my address. That's me. My school ID.
Again, though, sir, we're in the United States of America.
I know we are. I know geography. Can I just talk to your supervisor, please?
Sir, we're really busy
I need to pay
right
for my
now.
classes though.
What's
They're gonna
the
get
hold up?
canceled.
What's going on? There's line.
So he's a
I'm
non-documented
trying to
student.
pay.
Okay, all right. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it.
Okay.
Just meet me over here. Just keep the line moving, please.
Next.
I mean, that's really hard to watch, right? The whole interaction, even just like calling him an illegal student, and you can just see his reaction, like, oh, who else is hearing this? And the person who was attending to him, not knowing what an AB 540 student was, not knowing how to use the proper terminology, calling him an illegal student in front of everyone, right? And if you go back and see the clip, the they said it loud enough so people are hearing. And when he tried to present a form of ID, and again, this clip is a few years old, and to kind of remind folks, there was a time in California where individuals who are undocumented were not able to get either driver's licenses or identification cards. And so people were left with either student IDs, and then the consulate would give them a form of identification. In this case, it was the Mexican consulate that's located in San Francisco would give him an identification, and he would try to present that. And those identifications are in English and in Spanish, so you can see it and are able to read exactly what it says. And the individual who was receiving all of this information was like, we're not in Mexico, like, it was very dismissive of it. And then the supervisor who came was just like, let me deal with it, right? Like, now you're a person who has to be dealt with in this kind of thing. And all he wanted was an extension on his tuition, right? To be able to pay, because he can't qualify for other forms of financial aid and just needed some help. And individuals, and these are conversations that do happen, and that do happen now. Especially because we do have a growing class of people who are graduating every year who couldn't qualify for DACA because the program stopped taking applications a few years ago. And so every year there's a class of high school graduates who are maybe going to community college or trying to go to other institutions who don't have DACA and are having these interactions. Thankfully, there's a growing number, I think, of information and resources for administrators and college counselors and all that to have. So I think folks are slightly in a better position, but not everywhere, right? And so those are kind of the dynamics that undocumented students have to face, and the anxieties that they may have if they're coming to you for the very first time, and you might be the very first person that they're telling outside of their family. And so just kind of something to think about, right? As we're thinking about the dynamics of individuals seeking help in these spaces. But let's get into like, what is DACA, what's going on with it, in kind of a little bit of a remaining time. So DACA was enacted in 2012, and it was a work that it was something that was being worked on for years, and it was done during the Obama administration. But I think something that is really important, and if nothing else out of this presentation that you might remember, hopefully it's this, is that DACA was not a gift from the Obama administration. It was a political concession that occurred in 2012 during his reelection year, after consistent and sustained pressure by immigrant youth, by undocumented youth, who was pressing Obama to fulfill on his campaign promises back in 2008. If we're looking at just statistics, and these are statistics from the Department of Homeland Security, if we look from 2008 to 2012, and again, these numbers all the way up top, 360, 392, 382, these are in the hundreds of thousands. So 360, 360,000, 392,000, et cetera. So if you look at the 2008 2012 numbers, in those, that's the time during President Obama's time. He deported more people, more individuals were deported under his administration than the entire 8 years preceding it during the Bush administration. And so, and that's something that the community really felt. And again, he really campaigned under these pro-immigrant platform, but his actions really didn't really bear that out. Another thing to consider in these kind of statistics, just so you know how we're reading, I know that it tries to decipher between criminals and non-criminals, but really anybody who's characterized as anybody in the criminal category who was deported, this could be something as slight as like driving without a license, driving without insurance, a speeding ticket. Like they really have like an overbroad um, uh, uh, definition of who they characterize as a criminal immigrant in order to deport them. So this is kind of the backdrop of what was happening right before DACA. And so the movement that was happening at that time is that they were really trying to press President Obama to push on to do something, right? And they started to calling him the Porter in Chief. And one thing that's really interesting is that in President Obama's most recent book, he mentions this. He mentions that he found out that he was being called the Deporter in Chief in these protests, and that he saw these banners, and that like it really deeply offended him. That the community saw him like that, and it's something that really got to him. But it was earned. He was somebody who, under his administration and in the first few years, in the first term of his presidency, deported a lot of people. So so what ended up happening is that the immigrant youth really came together and was just kind of a sustained protest on the Obama administration, especially as it was leading up to the 2012 election year. And so one of the things that the activist was really pushing for was to just simply stop the deportations and the separations of families. Like that was it. They weren't asking for anything more really than that. And because what was happening a lot is that as individuals were engaging in this kind of civil disobedience in these protests, what happens when people are protesting and you're doing sit-ins and things like that? People get arrested. And what happens when people get arrested? Well, then they'll try to deport you because now you have criminal history, right? And so it's either for trespass or for disturbing the peace or whatever. And so one of the things that they really try to do, and one of the big movements, was to just like stop the deportations, particularly the deportations of what are called dreamers, right? The young folks who came here in the United States and have been here basically their entire lives. And so these are photos of what was happening during the time of the Obama administration. And you can tell like there was a big kind of campaign movement of students who are being deported, and it really sends in a strong message. Um, and um, and eventually, they succeeded. And again, they were relentless. They would go to some of his campaign speeches, and they would interrupt in the middle of his campaign speeches in order to get him to move and to do something, right? And eventually he buckled. One of the things to consider, we won't have too much time to do it today, so I'm actually gonna have to skip it, but I will encourage you to look at it on your own. Is that the idea of like, is there a way that the government can just stop the deportation of somebody because because of the goodness of their heart? Is there a way to do that where somebody could just say, we're not going to deport these people and we're just going to allow them to stay? Maybe we won't give them a green card. Maybe we won't give them citizenship, but we will just allow them to stay out of the goodness of their heart. Is there a way to do that? And so these activists did a lot of research. They did their homework, and they found a situation, they found a case where that happened, where there was this one individual who uh, um, was here on a visa, and then his visa had lapsed, and he was having troubles just renewing his visa to be here. So he was here without status, and essentially the government just said, well, we're just going to allow you to stay. Like, we're not going to try to deport you. We recognize that you're here, and we're just going to allow you to stay. And this was done back in like the 1960s or 1970s. And that person who, some people coin as like the original dreamer, because it was the original person who that happened to, was John Lennon from the Beatles. And so the thought was, if you're allowed to do it with one person, maybe you can do it with a class of people. And so there's a video from Vice. We won't get to it today because we won't have time, but I strongly encourage you to look at it. It goes through John Lennon's kind of history of that and how that's how the idea of DACA came in. So, but again, we won't be able to look at it today. And eventually President Obama announced DACA. And so we'll take a quick look at it here just so that you see what the announcement was like. And it also explains a little bit about what it is and what it is not.
Excuse me, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. This morning, Secretary Napolitano announced new actions my administration will take to mend our nation's immigration policy, to make it more fair, more efficient, and more just, specifically for certain young people, sometimes called dreamers. Now, these are young people who study in our schools, they play in our neighborhoods, they're friends with our kids, they pledge allegiance to our flag. They are Americans in their heart, in their minds, in every single way but one, on paper. They were brought to this country by their parents, sometimes even as infants, and often have no idea that they're undocumented until they apply for a job or a driver's license or a college scholarship. Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine you've done everything right your entire life. Studied hard, worked hard, maybe even graduated at the top of your class, only to suddenly face the threat of deportation to a country that you know nothing about, with a language that you may not even speak. That's what gave rise to the DREAM Act. It says that if your parents brought you here as a child, you've been here for 5 years, and you're willing to go to college or serve in our military, you can one day earn your citizenship. And I've said time and time and time again to Congress that send me the DREAM Act, put it on my desk, and I will sign it right away. Now, both parties wrote this legislation, and a year and a half ago, Democrats passed the DREAM Act in the House, but Republicans walked away from it. It got 55 votes in the Senate, but Republicans blocked it. The bill hasn't really changed. The need hasn't changed. It's still the right thing to do. The only thing that has changed, apparently, was the politics. Now, as I said in my speech on the economy yesterday, it makes no sense to expel talented young people who, for all intents and purposes, are Americans. They've been raised as Americans, understand themselves to be part of this country. To expel these young people who want to staff our labs or start new businesses or defend our country simply because of the actions of their parents or because of the inaction of politicians. In the absence of any immigration action from Congress to fix our broken immigration system, what we've tried to do is focus our immigration enforcement resources in the right places. So we prioritized border security, putting more boots on the southern border than at any time in our history. Today, there are fewer illegal crossings than at any time in the past 40 years. We focused and used discretion about whom to prosecute, focusing on criminals who endanger our communities rather than students who are earning their education. And today, deportation of criminals is up 80%. We've improved on that discretion carefully and thoughtfully. Well, today, we're improving it again. Effective immediately, the Department of Homeland Security is taking steps to lift the shadow of deportation from these young people. Over the next few months, eligible individuals who do not present a risk to national security or public safety will be able to request temporary relief from deportation proceedings and apply for work authorization. Now, let's be clear, this is not amnesty. This is not immunity. This is not a path to citizenship. It's not a permanent fix. This is a temporary stopgap measure that lets us focus our resources wisely while giving a degree of relief and hope to talented, driven, patriotic young people. It is the right thing to do.
So there's a President Obama announcing it, and he kind of goes into what DACA is, and essentially, what he's saying is that it's a process in which individuals who meet certain criteria give the government all of their information and essentially tell them, I'm here. I'm here and this is all my information. They have to go through a rigorous background check where you go to an office of the Department of Homeland Security, they take your fingerprints and they do a full investigation. And after you jump through all of those hurdles, then they'll give you, if you get it granted, this document that says, we recognize you're here, but we're also recognizing that you're not a priority for us to put in a deportation process or to deport. And so you don't have to worry about us doing that. And here's a work permit. Here's a permit that you can have to work. And I think one of the things that's really important to know about that is that when you get a work permit, you also get a social security number. A social security number isn't something you can just get. You get it if you're born here, but if you're not born here, you can't just get one. And so without a social security number, then you can already start kind of thinking of like, well, what do I use my social security number for? And what do I need it for? And if you start thinking about it, it really is something that's used for like the basic building blocks of life, right? In a lot of ways. And so without a social security number, employment becomes extraordinarily difficult. And just the ability to build anything becomes extraordinarily difficult. So with a social security number and with a work permit, which is the only thing that DACA provides, then it at least allows individuals to, one, not worry about deportation because they're getting at least some sort of confirmation that the government is not going to do anything against you. And then two, the ability to just sustain yourself, right? To be able to care for yourself through a work permit and a social security number for you to use. And so, so that was, provided by President Obama in 2012. And one of the things that happened in 2017, I think, as we all know, is that there was a change in presidential administrations in 2017, and we had President Trump at the time. And what was a bit interesting about President Trump and his conversations about DACA is that it was the one thing that he would be kind of soft on, where as he got elected, I remember because it sounded so strange coming from him, that he would say things like, we're going to treat dreamers with heart and things like that. So he kind of lulled everybody into this sense of security, like that DACA might be okay. And then all of a sudden he just terminated the program in 2017. And so what the legal challenges came from that 2017 decision to end the program was there was a legal challenge that, not that he couldn't end the program. Of course, President Obama initiated the program. Another president of the administration can take away the program. So really the challenge wasn't that he couldn't take it away. It was that he couldn't take it away in the way that he did it so abruptly. And also the reasons he used to take it away were not reasons that actually had any fact to them. So, for example, one of the reasons he cited that he was terminating the DACA program is that a lot of people were coming to the U.S. because they had DACA as an incentive to come. So that parents were bringing their kids in order for that to happen, and that it was incentivizing people to come here. But that really didn't bear out. There was no proof of that, and in fact, DACA recipients is a certain class of individuals where individuals who are coming here for the first time more recently are not going to be able to apply. And so ultimately the case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court, and there was two questions there that about the Supreme Court. One of them was, is DACA legal? So is what President Obama did legal by enacting such a DACA program? And then two, the second question is did President Trump end the program properly? And so when it went up to the Supreme Court, they just answered the second question, that they didn't really answer whether the program was legal or not. They just said, well, that almost doesn't matter according to the Supreme Court, because the way that they ended the program was so abrupt that the government can't just end a program that so many people are relying on. It has to take certain steps and do it properly. So the Supreme Court ultimately said, President Trump, you can't end the program in the way that you did. You can end it if you want, but you just can't do it in that way. And because the DACA program is such a popular program in the United States, almost like across political aisles, that President Trump didn't want to touch the subject again, and that's why he didn't like touch or try to end the DACA program a second time in the rest of his presidential term. But what happened was that the state of Texas picked up right where the case left off and essentially said, well, there's still this other question, right? The Supreme Court, you said that terminating the DACA program, that they didn't do it in the right way. Okay, fine. But is the DACA program legal to begin with? That question was still kind of left out there. And so the state of Texas sued and said, we want to get a court order saying, essentially answering the first question, that the DACA program is illegal. And they were very careful about where they filed their lawsuits. They filed it in a particular place in Texas where they knew they had a judge who was already very critical about this program. And that judge ultimately ruled that the DACA program was illegal to begin with. And so now that's kind of what's going on with the DACA program now, is that they're trying to end it by saying, well, okay, President Trump didn't end it correctly because they were supposed to take all these steps to end this kind of real intense program. But now they're just trying to get a ruling that the program is illegal to begin with. And so they're trying to end the program that way. And it's getting traction. And one thing to consider is that the makeup of the Supreme Court is now different, right? At the time where we litigated the case, the initial DACA case, we had a different component of justices there, including Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who has since passed away and has been replaced by other judges, right? And so the court is now a lot more conservative, and so if the case goes back up to the Supreme Court on the initial question, is DACA just even legal to begin with? I think there's a lot of concern that the court in its current makeup will rule that the DACA program is illegal to begin with, and so that they're just going to end it that way. And so what that would mean is that a lot of these students or a lot of these individuals, and who ends up being some of your students, have a work permit that will all of a sudden they will no longer have. And this promise that they had that they're not going to be subject to deportation, a deportation process, is no longer going to be there. And so they're going to now be shared with the rest of the individuals who don't have DACA. And so, but right now there is those kind of two classes of people: those with DACA that have a work permit and a social security number, and then those without DACA, because the DACA program was paused while the litigation is going on about whether DACA is legal or not. So the individuals who have DACA right now can continue to renew it, but individuals who didn't get a chance to apply can no longer apply. And so that's why every year there's ongoing graduating class of individuals who have who can't apply for DACA and are essentially just fully undocumented, don't have a work permit, and don't have a social security number. And so they're stuck in those situations. And so what can we do? Like, what are the resources, and kind of what are we looking at for these folks, and what does that look like? So I think to start out, one of the things to consider is that and I think that question that I typically get is like about employment. Like, what does that mean about their employment, and can they be employed? They don't have a work permit, they don't have a social security number, but I know some people work like that anyway. Like, how does that all look like? And really what the law says, I guess I could tell you that, is that if someone who doesn't have a work permit, they can't be an employee somewhere. And so it very specifically says that they can't be an employee somewhere. And so so the way in which someone is hired to be employed is very important, right? And so let me give you an example. There's when we're thinking about how someone is employed to do a certain job and getting paid for it, if you are considered an employee, where you have to fill out the form, the I-9, and get a W-2, individuals without DACA will not be able to get that opportunity, because they don't have not only the proper documentation to fill out an I-9, but including a social security number, but the law says that they can't and shouldn't be employed. And so because they can't be employees. But individuals can work as independent contractors. There's nothing that says that they can't do that. And I think one of the biggest differences in terms of just resources and how to apply is that when you work as an independent contractor, you're not filling out the form I-9, you're filling out the form, the 1099, right? The tax form 1099. And in filling out that form, you don't necessarily need a social security number, of which undocumented students don't have. All you need is what is called an individual tax ID number, or an ITIN. And that's something that anyone can apply with the IRS, indicating that they want an ITIN. And the IRS will give it to you. And it's a number that individuals can use to just report their taxes. And so in being hired, so to speak, in as an independent contractor, individuals without legal status, or individuals who just have, nothing, don't have DACA, can benefit from an independent contractor position if their prospective employer is willing to hire them as such. But there are other ways, there are other kind of creative ways that an individual can get some sort of money for their work, as long as they're not characterized as an employee. And so, for example, what we've seen other universities do is that they'll give them on-campus jobs, and instead of paying them as an employee or an employee of the school, they'll give them a scholarship, and they'll give them the money in the form of a scholarship, or they'll give them the money in the form of some sort of fellowship, or whatever it is. And so it ends up about being creative about how that transaction occurs, and how that person is characterized or categorized within that framework. And having someone who's willing to be flexible with that, whether that's an employer or whether that's an institution. One of the things that I think is important too is that California specifically has two things that I think really help undocumented students in their access to higher education. One of them is, as I mentioned earlier, Assembly Bill 540, and this just allows certain undocumented individuals, regardless as to whether you have DACA or not, to be able to pay in-state tuition in California, so that you won't be characterized as or categorized as like an international student and have to pay like all these extra fees. And so, and then a few years ago, the California passed what is called the California Dream Act. And what the California Dream Act is really just a financial based legislation. I know the Dream Act, as we all kind of colloquially know it, is a piece of legislation that's been introduced several times that has not passed, that ultimately gets individuals a pathway to citizenship. That it's been introduced many times, and it just hasn't been passed. The California Dream Act has nothing to do with getting citizenship or not. It has to do with access to resources. And so what the California Dream Act does is that it allows DACA recipients, and it doesn't matter whether they had DACA before, don't have DACA now, like if it expired and they didn't renew it for whatever reason, or if you just don't have DACA at all, those individuals also qualify. And they allow for certain type of financial aid that somebody can receive through the institution, through the college or university. And that includes private scholarships funded through public universities. And that's actually something that is really worth considering, because there are so many donors that donate to the university specifically for scholarships. And what used to happen is that the university just used to put that all in one pot to be able to provide it to students, including just like in their kind of financial aid packages. Now, California universities and colleges have done a better job to kind of decipher like what are private-based donations that we can then use for undocumented students, and able to provide it to those kind of greater that greater base. Also state administered financial aid. So the state of California has its own kind of set of budget and resources for financial aid that they can provide for students regardless of their citizenship status. University grants, fee waivers for community college, Cal grants. And again, it also reinforces the in-state tuition portions of it. What it doesn't do is that it doesn't allow, or it still doesn't provide for any kind of federal financial aid. So FAFSA is out of the question. Individuals can't get FAFSA, whether that's any kind of grants or loans on FAFSA. That is still unattainable through for undocumented students, but but they can't get all these other kind of state-based resources. Now, this is California-based, and I focus this primarily in California, but different states have different resources. Some states don't allow for students to have in-state tuition or undocumented students to have in-state tuition or to even to have the state-based financial resources. Some do, right? That's obviously subject to the politics of the state. But one good way or one good resource to have, and then I'll open up for questions, is let's see if I have it here. These are some of the I think if you're thinking about like where can I look for some of these resources, these are like some of the main resources that you can find a lot of like national based information. And United We Dream actually has like a whole handbook for college administrators that they update every year or every 2 years with ongoing scholarships, resources, and kind of like a national guide of like this is what state and the geographical landscape looks like for undocumented students, both with and without DACA. And so I would highly encourage you to look at United We Dream and look at the resource section in their webpage, because they have a lot of these resources that they keep up to date. Same things with Immigrant Rising. Immigrant Rising provides a lot of economic opportunities, either that's through grants, or scholarships that they provide for students. And again, this is for both DACA and undocumented students who didn't qualify for DACA. For individuals who are particularly trying to go into the health field, there's this organization that was made by undocumented students called Pre-Health Dreamers, or PhD, and they provide resources specifically for individuals who are trying to go into the health field. So again, those are in the forms of fellowships, those are in the forms of scholarships, and then just overall like the process to apply for some of these programs, like a nursing program. We have undocumented students who are in medical programs, like in medical school, and so they provide that kind of roadmap to go there. So if you have students who are thinking about going into the medical field, whether again that's going into nursing or doctors or whatever kind of medical field that they want to go to, Breathe Hill Dreamers have an abundance of resources specifically for that. And they've grown quite exponentially over the years. So they now also have resources with other medical health professionals that they can link them up to so that they can just navigate that profession. Because as we know from undocumented students, a lot of time they're first generation students too, right? Which is its own kind of sets of dynamics. And so and the last one I'll mention is there's this organization called Undocumented Professionals. And what this organization tries to do is that it tries to pull in different professionals from all sorts of fields, whether that's like real estate or whether that's trade or whether that's a more professional licensure, and really try to provide resources and mentorship with individuals already in that field. And so it really is more of a network of individuals rather than like providing financial resources. They're providing more like mentorship of individuals who are already in that space, who also have either are undocumented now or navigated those spaces as they were undocumented. And so these are the really good connections to have in order and the resources to keep in mind as you're working through with your students. So if they're coming in saying like, I'm thinking about going to XYZ college, but I'm worried about financial aid, you may want to go into the United We Dream or Immigrants Rising, to see what's going on, or if they're thinking about going up in a very particular field, but they don't know kind of the first thing about how to even apply to nursing school or how to apply to law school or whatever it is, then undocumented professionals would be good to point them to or to look into in order to provide some of that real tangible network based mentorship in order to get them to to kind of help them through that process. And again, for individuals who are going into the health field, there's one specific to them. A last thing I want to mention, I know I mentioned the individual tax identification number. You can get it through the IRS in the IRS website, and you can apply. It's quite easy to apply, and anyone can get it. And so once you have an ITIN, then it at least opens up the door for an individual to be employed as an independent contractor, rather than, and they still can't be an employee if they don't have legal status and they don't have DACA, but at least it's something, right? And if you run into students who don't have an ITIN number or an ITIN, it would be good to encourage them to get it, because as individuals are getting scholarships and things like that, like they may ask for some sort of kind of tax-based number, and so they can use that in lieu of a social security number. So I know I'm going like way over time, and I hope we still have a little bit of time for Q&A, although I know we're running kind of a little short. So yeah, I'll stop there. Oh, yeah,
Kelty, you're on mute still.
Oh, sorry. I was making a joke. I was just saying this is why Luis and I are friends, because we could both talk for hours uninterrupted. And as far as timing, I'll leave that to you.
Yeah, I think we can use a couple more minutes.
Yeah, I had enough time.
Luis, this is amazing presentation. Such great information. I actually have a question. As we think about the election ahead, right? And there's a sense of worry, there's a sense of anxiety among students that are undocumented, actually amongst, I think, everyone. And so I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we support students in that sense of, especially in this time of what we've seen from the past from one of the candidates and what we know about the Supreme Court and some of the recent rulings and so forth. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, how do we best support our students?
I think, yeah, one of the things that I think was very helpful that I saw kind of the last go around was one is just creating a space for individuals to have, and I think to um, be within that community. And so whether that's setting a virtual space, I saw that a lot because again, some of this was kind of in the COVID times, right? And so, but having a virtual space, I think was really helpful because it allowed individuals to participate and engage without necessarily having to go somewhere if they're feeling nervous about going somewhere. Or wanted to participate a little bit more passively, and just having the space to just be with each other during this time, and not feel like you're going through it alone. I think it's very, very helpful. I think that's one. And then two, um, I think being to the extent that some of these resources can be announced to students proactively, I think that that would be very helpful. Because there's some students who like don't like wouldn't even know where to look, and like where to even kind of start. And so kind of nudging them in some of this direction, either with United We Dream or with Immigrants Rising or Young Professionals. Like I think just giving them those resources, I think would be very helpful because a lot of these organizations are led by either DACA recipients or individuals who don't have DACA. And I think just even having that representation can be very powerful to say like, oh, they're doing it. And so maybe I can hold on, if we're seeing other folks kind of thrive in those spaces. I don't know if that answered your question fully.
Yeah.
You know,
Thank you.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't have a question. I do want to say thank you. Personally, not a lot of people know this, but my sister, she was very active in that movement in the early 2006 as well. She was also arrested for civil disobedience, and because she knew that she could take the place of an individual who could not put their body on the line. So that's something that stuck with me. So I'm very happy to know that there were other individuals who continued the fight when we ourselves could no longer dedicate that time. So I'm forever grateful for of the work that you've done and forever grateful for the work that you will continue to do. So thank you for sharing your story and thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Carlos. You're gonna make me cry. Thank you. Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think I continue to be inspired by is that it was a big community effort, and I think that that's one of the things that is very important is that it 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 was done through organizing of people and organizing of students. It was really mostly students that did it, and I think one of the things to consider in terms of just like progress, you know. I remember when I was going through undergrad and trying to explain to people what like an AB 540 student was, like that one guy. And now we're in a situation where if you tell someone, like I'm a dreamer, they'll at least kind of know what you're talking about, you know, and like at least kind of know. And that's a huge, I mean, that's a huge progress forward. I think if you were to ask any individual, like kind of randomly 10 years ago, 15 years ago, like, is there any portion of the undocumented population you think should stay? Right? I think they should all stay. But, you know, if you're asking just kind of random Joe Schmo, you know, 10, 15 years ago, they might just be like, what are you talking about? Or no. And now there's at least some movement to say, like, well, you know, I've heard a lot about these dreamers, and like, and I think it really is kind of changing a bit of the narrative about how we're perceiving our community. And there's still a lot more to be done, right? But it is a step forward, right? As we're kind of having these broader discussions. And so um, you know, I think one of the things that happened, unfortunately, with DACA was always meant to just be a placeholder so that if we have a protection from deportation, we can then use that protection from deportation to continue to just interrupt and keep making noise and you know, as folks call it, getting into good trouble. But I think once individuals started getting DACA, they saw it more as a result at that point, like, oh, we made it. And so a lot of this pushing kind of stopped once DACA happened. And it's led us into a situation where we're now this is what we have. And so what I'm really hopeful for is that, you know, as DACA might be taken away, that it kind of engages folks to go back to 2012 and to continue to making those kind of troubles. So well, I think Chris has a question.
Awesome. Thank you. First, I want to say thank you for the information. I know it's a lot of details and a lot of specifics. And one of the stories I wanted to share really quick was at my previous institution, I was in charge of creating our undocumented task force. So one of the things that we had done was right when we were trying to get students involved, that was the big announcement of the potential end of DACA. And that set such a riffle through our students because there was just so much uncertainty of like, well, what do you mean stop? What do you mean the president can just say no, or, you know, kind of just the understanding what was going on. So we had a lot of students who just overnight just disappeared, completely ghosted us because they were just so afraid, if not for themselves, for their family, of just, what does this mean? How do we move forward, etc. So one, thank you for just, you know, combating that and, you know, kind of giving at least our students that safe space to like, hey, it may not happen now, but at least there's someone or something that's really pushing and sort of pushing back on that. So one, thank you for doing all of that work and everything else. My question to you is similar to what Amin was mentioning as far as like, how do we support our students? What do you sort of anticipate or maybe see on the horizon that could be an issue sort of within the next, you know, 4 to 5 years, regardless of whether, you know, we're going to change administration or not, but just more so of the landscape? Like, what do you see that could potentially be an issue in the future that we as sort of educators can really be prepared for in supporting our students?
Yeah, you know, I think I kind of think about it in the more assuming for a moment that DACA stays in place or at least some version of it. Uh, I think one of the other part that's really important to do is to try to figure out like um what all the requirements are for some of the jobs that some of the students want to go to, and then figure out whether they have access to those jobs, and I'll be specific in a second, and two, if not, as an institution, see if there's something that as an institution there could be some institutional based advocacy that can be done to change it. So specifically what I'm thinking about is um even for folks who had DACA, there was a lot of issues of having access to like certain professional licenses, like licensing for nurses, licensing for doctors, to be a lawyer, to be a teacher, to be an EMT. And some of these more professional based licenses, the state had like a social security number requirement, for example, or something like that. And so, or some kind of like requirement that like wasn't right really with it didn't necessarily have to do with their immigration status, but it also had a few barriers along the way. And one of the reasons that California again trailblazed their they changed a few of their statutes to make them more inclusive so that there wasn't really like a citizenship requirement or a residency requirement, was because institutions really pushed for it. And they would reach out to their local representatives and say like, hey, like us as an institution, state representative, like we're seeing this from our students and we want to see what you can do to help open up that access, because we have people who want to be teachers and we have people who want to do whatever. And so the power that an institution has to kind of like really push for that is important. So like getting a survey of like what students want to do, and then seeing, okay, like what is it going to take for them to get there? Like what kind of licensures they're going to need and that kind of thing. And then seeing kind of what institutional based advocacy can be done, I think would really go a long way on a state level. California is already, kind of a trailblazer with that, but I know that students sometimes like to go out of state, right? They're going to all these other maybe middle America states who may not have any idea how all this works. And so so again, I think having an institution kind of vouch for some of that would be very helpful.
I'm gonna have
And
to.
also I think coalition building, right? Like what kind of universities can you guys recommend folks to that will be accepting of these students, and maybe educating those students who, a university in Arkansas somewhere who may not necessarily have that, but may listen to you all about like, hey, we have the students, and how can we do a handoff to make sure that this student is being supportive? And next thing you know, maybe you're sending 5 students over there, and then next thing you know, you're sending, whatever. And I think having the coalition building can be very, very, very powerful.
I
Those
know
are
that
some of the things
we are way, way, way over time, and I know I have to hop off. But I also want to know, I want to make sure and get a pulse check and see, because I know Robin and I do have to hop off, and I know Luis, you've given more than what we could ever ask for, and we want to have you come back because we still have lots of questions. Arindira, is it a quick question that we can get to, or I want to make sure we
I
get
don't
your
know.
question?
I posted it in the chat, but it's basically if there's a reliable news source that can simplify things, because a lot of our undocumented students are also ESL students, and it's really hard sometimes, even for myself, to understand what the news are trying to tell me.
United We Dream has a newsletter that they send out, and they send it out in different languages. And so if you go to the website and sign up for their newsletter, it also gives you an option as to what language you would like it in. And so they do a good job about providing that access. And they try to simplify it as much as it can be simplified.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Luis. We're so grateful. We're definitely going to be having you back.
I would love to come back. Yeah, sorry for
Yes.
taking the entire time. I was hoping
No,
that
no
we'd have some more time,
worries.
I love it.
But we appreciate you so, so, so very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you again for Kelty for bringing me along. It was good to see everybody.
Thanks, Luis.